You're listening to Business Radio Talkers.fm. My name is Wayne Buckler, and my guest today in conversation is Christopher Kerin. Now, Chris is talking to us from Sydney. He is the legal director and practitioner at Kerin Benson Lawyers. And Kerin Benson Lawyers is a boutique firm with a particular specialty, but we'll let Chris tell us about that. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Now, Chris, fill us in. I've had a look at your website, but that's cheating. Fill us in on the boutique specialty of Kerin Benson.
So, Kerin Benson Lawyers is a law firm that specialises in acting for people who live in apartments. And so the sort of four practice areas that we're in are levy recovery, where people don't pay their levies, drafting bylaws or rules in the ACT, strata disputes, general strata disputes, where the owners corporation or body corporate is not doing what a lot owner thinks they're responsible to do, or vice versa. And fourthly, building defects, where there are defects in the building and action needs to be taken against the builder or developer or the architect and engineer responsible. And we work across three cities. So my business partner, Alison Benson's based in Newcastle. I'm based in Sydney with a number of junior lawyers here in our Sydney office. And we also have an office in Canberra. Probably about almost half of my work, maybe a bit more, is actually based in the ACT, which is obviously a different jurisdiction with different laws.
And Chris, given the number of apartment buildings that are around and apartment owners and dwellers, this has got to be a fairly booming area of law, hasn't it?
It is. So 1.2 million people live in apartment buildings in New South Wales, and it's estimated that by 2040, half of the people in New South Wales will either be living or working in strata title buildings. So, yeah, it's a lot of people being affected by these rules that sometimes they don't even know exist and obviously don't necessarily always comply with.
Well, it's having been down this path myself, it's easy to look at an apartment and the real estate agent's telling you what great value it is and where it is and all the rest of it. As a kind of naive consumer, there's not a lot of thought goes into, in my behalf anyway, there's not a lot of consideration goes into what if the builder hasn't done the right thing in something that's elsewhere in the building that you can't see, that subsequently causes problems. So it would be easy to get caught, I suspect. Yes.
It's the last thing people are thinking about when they're buying an apartment. So the real estate agent selling the purchaser a dream, effectively, and the people are thinking about that dream and how their life will be, and the positive aspects of that when they're purchasing the apartment. Unfortunately, most people don't have a lot of knowledge about the laws that sit around living in strata buildings. In fact, some people don't even know that they have to pay levies when they buy into these buildings, and when they get the levy notice from the strata managing agent, it's a bit of a surprise in the sense that they weren't expecting it. So, look, there's a big range in terms of the knowledge of people who live in these buildings, and some people have very little knowledge. I think the average is slowly increasing in terms of the amount of knowledge people have when they're living in these apartments, but it's a bit of a slow process.
What are the kind of builder's defects that you see most commonly?
The most common building defect that I see is water ingress, and typically water ingress from balconies. So there's a whole technical area there. Also water ingress in bathrooms where the various standards and building code of Australia hasn't been complied with, and you've got water ingress to other parts of the apartment or building as a result of that. Water ingress in underground car parks. They're the most common things that I see. The most topical things, of course, are aluminium cladding on the side of buildings. So a couple of years ago, we saw the fire down at Laurel Cross building in Docklands in Melbourne, which is some quite striking footage of that building literally going up. The Marina Torch in Dubai is a building that's caught fire 3 times in the last 5 years, and that's even more spectacular. That's a 50 or 60-storey building. And, of course, the Grenfell fire in London, which was very tragic. And, in fact, in Sydney there was a fire 5 years ago where a woman was killed and jumping out of the building, and another woman was very seriously injured. So fire is something that is also becoming more known, and government is now racing to try and deal with those issues.
Is this an issue of poor inspections and building compliance when it's been put up, or is it a regulatory problem that it's legal and it shouldn't be?
It's a range of things, and it includes the complexity of these buildings. These buildings are not three-storey red brick walk-ups that you would normally see in the 60s and 70s. Yep. They are large buildings that sometimes house hundreds of people. There's a complexity about the build that is sometimes beyond the capability of the builder building the building, if you like.
Right.
So they're just hard to build because they're complicated pieces of construction. So there's that element. There's elements around the disappearance of a role called Clerk of Works, and he's been replaced by someone called a project manager. And so quality control's probably gone a bit down by there. You've had private certification, which has come in, and the difficulty where private certifiers rely on repeat work from developers for their business model work, and that naturally creates conflict in terms of the person you're supposed to be policing is also responsible for your next job.
Yes.
And then also things like the importation of aluminium cladding. There are just some lax laws around that. There's been a Senate inquiry about that. They've issued a report. One of the recommendations of the report, just from September last month, was that this aluminium cladding, the importation of this type of aluminium cladding, be banned. So look, it's not one thing, it's probably 6 or 7 or more things that have all come together and created this problem.
You're listening to Business Radio Talkers.fm. My name is Wayne Buckler, and my guest in conversation today is Christopher Kerin. Christopher's the legal practitioner director at Kerin Benson Lawyers. And Kerin Benson Lawyers, if you've missed the beginning of our interview, is a boutique law firm that provides legal services to owners, corporations, community associations, strata managers and individual lot owners. So this boutique service to really apartment owners and dwellers, I guess, is how I'd encapsulate it. Chris, we've talked about building defects. What are the usual areas of dispute around body corporates and owners associations?
There's no usual. The imagination, when human beings are involved, the imagination boggles, and it can be any one of a range of things, from noise complaints. Noise complaints are quite common.
Yes.
But you get issues around exclusive use areas in terms of whether someone's entitled to use a particular area of the building exclusively, keeping others out. We've had a situation where someone's literally had a drug manufacturing operation in an apartment. So look, it's just a range of things. A lot of it comes around. So typically, the owner's corporation is required to repair and maintain common property, and so sometimes there's a leak. You outlined your personal experience just before the interview about a hailstorm which broke the skylight. The issue there is, was the skylight common property or not? If it was common property, then the owners corporation has to replace it. If it isn't common property, the lot owner has to replace it. And so sometimes you can get some argy-bargy over, well, who is going to pay for this? So, look, it's just a range of disputes.
And as we were saying before, there's lots and lots of people living in apartments, and I guess when you put a lot of people living together in a closed area, the number of disputes is likely to rise. Yeah,
and the difficulty is that some people shouldn't be in apartments because they're not suited for it. The people who are particularly sensitive to noise or just having other people in close proximity to them constantly are not people who I would recommend live in apartments. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, of course, these things can be accentuated by mental health issues, which are common. And so if someone is afflicted by something like that, that can make life for those around them quite difficult. So, there's a range of issues around who should be living and not living in apartments.
It should mean that you live an interesting life, Chris. Now, Chris, for people that we've maybe caught their attention today and they're interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with Kerin Benson Lawyers?
Look, they can simply just ring us or just send us an email to our inquiries email, which is on the website.
So the website is Kerin Benson Lawyers, all spelled out, Kerin, Benson, BENSON, lawyers.com.au. And the phone number is, in Sydney, 02 8706 7060. Chris, thanks for being with us today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
If you've just missed my conversation with Chris Kerin of Kerin Benson Lawyers, you've missed a fascinating insight into a legal practitioner who specialises in, for want of a better word, apartment dwellers, the owners, corporations, community associations, strata managers, and individual lot owners. The good news is, if you missed that conversation, we have a transcript on our website. We also have an audio archive of the whole interview on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. All of that you can find on the talkers.fm website at talkers.fm. This is Business Radio Talkers.fm.